Hey guys, this is Allison from Alley Cat Creations. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I get a lot of views, but it likes. Amish mindset, peoples. And I thank you for those who do. And if you get anything from my work, a connect, a dot, an epiphany, a mind blown moment, a new author to read, a new book to explore, please consider supporting my work. All the links are at the bottom of this description. Before I start the Secret Doctrine, I want to thank my family, soul family, from the Time Is Now podcast for supporting my work and helping get more people to this channel. Without them and their help and promotion, I'd be still slowly growing. And I am still slowly growing, but I really want to thank them and give them a shout out. Please check them out on Rumble. The Time Is Now podcast. You can also find me in the chats with We Not Me. And currently Jack breaks out. A lot going on there. So I want to, for those that don't do the Rumble thing, explore some new content in the world that I'm involved in outside of reading books. It's very good information, beautiful knowledge, beautiful people. And for those who are interested in my pyramids and my artwork and whatever have you that I do, my store is not open yet. I was in contact with 2 art type sites, and they don't do everything that I need them to do. So I'm looking in other possibilities. It's like a trial by error, which one's going to take all the stuff that I make, and not just some. That's like the important part. And that's where I'm having some technical difficulties finding the right spot for me. So, because I'm making candles that are spiritual. I only did a small batch, like 6 candles of each scent that I'm doing, just to see if people like them. I don't know. I love candles. I light them all the time. There's one right there. The pyramids do take time. They take at least 7 days. I just ordered a whole bunch more molds because you got to put the pyramid upside down to start it. And it has to go in like a shell so it holds. So I only have 2 and I'm working on 2 right now, but I'm getting some requests to make them. So please keep patient. More molds are coming so I can start more work. But these things do take days to make because it's layer, you got to let it dry. More stuff, layer, you got to let it dry. More stuff, layer, you got to let it dry. And I just undid a mold and one of mine did not dry well. So I got to figure out what goes on with that. But in the meantime, the stuff takes a while. So if you're interested in anything, email me and I will go over what I do and we'll go from there. I customize the pyramids to, if you want healing, I put copper, silver, all types of different types of gems. I just ordered a bunch. Again, prices vary also because of the size and the materials that I use. If I don't use as much copper or if I don't put certain gems in, it becomes cheaper. I'm really not, I'm giving you the cost of what it makes. Like I'm not giving any. profit, because then I have to ship it, and that's also money. So I just want to get that out there. Please be patient. The store is going to happen. It's just a matter of where I'm landing. And I don't think I didn't think about my own website, but the cost right now to do one is a little out of my expense. Things are getting really tight. I got plumbers I have to, again, I'm getting estimates for plumbing. The guy that I was supposed to have my shelf built, he never called me back, so I have to go find someone else. A lot of this I've been trying to do for the past few months. It's not like I've been sitting idle. Just stuff takes time, and estimates are. So I'm trying to get the best efficient thing so I can get the work done properly and right without breaking my bank. And because I don't have a job or a steady set of income, I'm trying to do the best that I can with what I have. So I just wanted to get that out there before I start the reading, clear some stuff up, and I might have to say it a few more times because not everybody watches Blavatsky. But that yesterday was a banana nut day, and that's why I didn't put a video up. I love people. I do. But if I don't get paid for doing other people's stuff, like, I got to focus on my own. I don't get paid to do what I do. I volunteer, which is fine. And I love helping people, but I got to focus sometimes on myself because I am the only source of income. I don't have a husband. I don't have another roommate. I don't want that. But again, it's just me. I have no one else to fall back on. So I got to focus on me sometimes. My cup has to be full in order for me to help other people. Now my cup is getting halfway full, and it's getting a little more difficult. So sorry that I didn't put one out yesterday. Quote. This is Latin, I'm assuming. And Lumen Sit Corpus Nuc Nun. Question. Most decidedly, light is not a body, we are told. Physical science says light is a force, a vibration, the undulation of ether. It is the property or quality of matter, or even an affection thereof, never a body. Just so, for this discovery, the knowledge, whatever it may be, worth, that light or caloric is not a motion of material particles. Science is chiefly indebted, if not solely, to Sir W. Grove. It was he who was the first in a lecture at the London Institute in 1842 to show that light, heat are affections of matter itself, and not a distinct ethereal, imponderable fluid, a state of matter now permeating it. Yet perhaps for some physicists, as for Ørsted, a very eminent scientist, force and forces were tactily spirit in nature. What several rather mystical scientists taught was that light, heat, magnetism, electricity, and gravity, etc., were not the final causes of the visible phenomena, including planetary motion, but themselves the secondary effects of other causes, for which science in our day cares very little, but in which occultism believes, for the occultists have exhibited proofs of the this word doesn't project well out of me. Validity, yes, of their claims in every age. In what age where there are no occultists and no adepts? Sir Isaac Newton held to the Pythagorean corpuscular theory and was also inclined to admit its consequences, which made the Count de Maistre hope at one time that Newton would ultimately lead science back to the recognition of the fact that forces in the celestial bodies were propelled and guided by intelligences. Pause. That's major. Why? Again, going back to Dolores Cannon and a few others, it's not just Dolores, but she says it very eloquently and spells it out very nicely. If you were once the rock, the tree, the grass, blade, whatever have you, you also were a planet, were the universe. A part of you was the intelligence in one of these bodies, these planets. If you're a light, which you are, and you're the creative spirit, you are also a part of it all. And all meaning planets, the universe, the cosmos, all of it. You got to think expansively bigger. But de Maistre counted without his host. The innermost thoughts and ideas of Newton were perverted, like everything else. And of his great mathematical learning, only the mere physical husk was turned to account. He had poor Sir Isaac foreseen to what use his successors and followers would apply his gravity, that pious and religious man would surely be quietly eaten his apple and never breathed a word about any mechanical ideas connected with its fall. Great contempt is shown for metaphysics generally, and that's true, and for ontological metaphysics especially. I'm beaming right now because, again, I'm reading this with you. And my belief system in how this universe is created is by ontological mathematics, but there's also ontological metaphysics. Although my metaphysics professor in college sucked. He made us read Descartes. Horrible. I'm not a Descartes fan, if you can tell. But we see whenever the occultists are bold enough to raise their diminished heads that materialistic physical science is honeycombed with metaphysics, that its most fundamental principles, while inseparably wedded to transcendentalism, another word that's hard for me to get out, are nevertheless, in order to show modern science divorced from such dreams, tortured, and often ignored in the maze of contradictory theories and hypotheses. A very good collaboration of this charge lies in the fact that science finds itself absolutely compelled to accept the hypothetical ether and to try to explain it on the materialistic grounds of atomo-mechanical laws. This attempt has led directly to the most fatal discrepancies and radical inconsistencies between the assumed nature of ether and its physical actions. A second proof is found in the many contradictory statements about the atom, the most metaphysical object in creation. Now, what does the modern science of physics know of ether? The first concept of which belongs undeniably to ancient philosophers, the Greeks, having borrowed it from the Aryans, and the origin of modern ether being found in and disfigured from Akasha. The disfigurement is claimed to be modified and redefinement of the idea of Lucretius. I think that's how you say his name. Let us then examine the modern concept from several scientific volumes containing the emissions of the physicists themselves. The existence of ether is accepted by physical astronomy, in ordinary physics, and in chemistry. Astronomers who first began by regarding it as a fluid of extreme tenuity and mobility, offering no sensible resistance to the motions of celestial bodies, never gave a thought to its continuity and discontinuity. Its main function in modern astronomy has been to serve as a basis for hydrodynamical theories of gravitation. In physics, the fluid appeared for some time in several roles in connection with the imponderables. So cruelly put to death by Sir W. Grove, some physicists have even given and identified the ether of space with those imponderables. Then came their kinetic theories, and from the date of the dynamical theory of heat, it was chosen in optics as a substratum for luminous undulations. Then, in order to explain the dispersion and polarization of light, physicists had to resort once more to their scientific imagination and forthwith endowed the ether with an atomic or molecular structure and with an enormous elasticity, so that its resistance to deformation far exceed that of the most rigid elastic bodies. This necessitated the theory of the essential discontinuity of matter, hence of ether. After having accepted the discontinuity, in order to account for dispersion and polarization, theoretical impossibilities were discovered with regard to such dispersions. Cauchy's, I don't know if I'm saying that name right, scientific imagination saw in atoms material points without extension, and he proposed, in order to obviate the most formidable obstacles to the undulatory theory, namely some well-known mechanical theorems which stood in the way, to assume that the ethereal medium of propagation, instead of being continuous, should consist of particles separated by sensible distances. Fresnel rendered the same service to the phenomena of polarization. E.B. Hunt upset the theories of both. There are now men of science who proclaim them materially fallacious, while others, the optimo-mechanalists, cling to them with desperate tenacity. The supposition of the atom or molecular constitution of ether is upset, moreover, by thermodynamics, for Clerk Maxwell showed that such a medium would be simply gas. The hypothesis of finite intervals is thus proven of no avail as a supplement to undulatory theory. Besides, eclipses fail to reveal any such variation of color as supposed by Cauchy, on the assumption that the chromatic rays are propagated with different velocities. Astronomers have pointed out more than one phenomena absolutely at variance with this doctrine. Thus, while in one department of physics, the atomo-molecular constitution of the ether is accepted in order to account for one set of special phenomena, in another department, such a constitution is found quite subversive of a number of well-ascertained facts. Heron's charges being thus justified, chemistry deemed it impossible to concede enormous elasticity to the ether without depriving it of other properties, upon the assumption of which the construction of its modern theories depended. This ended in a final transformation of ether. The exegeses of the atomo-mechanical theory have led distinguished mathematicians and physicists to attempt to substitute for the traditional atoms of matter peculiar forms of vortical motion in a universal, homogeneous, incompressible, and continuous material medium, or ether. The present writer, claiming no great scientific education, but only a tolerable acquaintance with modern theories, and a better one with occult sciences, picks up weapons against the detractors of the esoteric teaching in the very arsenal of modern science. The glaring contradictions, mutuality, destructive hypothesis of world-renowned scientists, their mutual accusations, denunciations, and disputes show plainly that whether accepted or not, the occult theories have as much to a hearing as any of the so-called learned and academical hypothesis. Thus, whether the followers of the Royal Society choose to accept ether as a continuous or discontinuous fluid matters little, and is indifferent to the present purpose. It is simply points to one certainty. The official science knows nothing to this day of the constitution of ether. Let science call it matter if it likes, only neither as akasha nor as the one sacred ether of the Greeks is it to be found in any of the states of matter known to modern physics. It is matter on quite another plane of perception and being, and it can neither be analyzed by scientific apparatus, appreciated, nor can conceived by scientific imagination unless the possessors thereof study the occult sciences. That which follows proves this statement. It is clearly demonstrated by Stallo as regards the crucial problems of modern physics, as well as was done by De Quatrefi, whoa, that's a last name I can't pronounce, and several others in those of anthropology, biology, etc., that in their efforts to support their individuals' hypothesis and systems, the majority of the eminent and learned materialists very often utter the greatest fallacies. Let us take the following case. Most of them reject actio in distance, one of the fundamental principles in the question of ether or akasha in occultism, while, as Stallo justly observes, there is no physical action which, on close examination, does not resolve itself in actio in distans, and he proves it. Now, metaphysical arguments, according to Professor Lodge, are unconscious appeals to experience. And he adds that if such an experience is not conceivable, then it does not exist. In his own words, if a highly developed mind or set of minds finds a doctrine about some comparatively simple and fundamental matter absolutely unthinkable, it is an evidence that the unthinkable state of things has no existence. And thereupon, toward the end of his lecture, Professor Lodge indicates that the explanation of cohesion as well as gravity is to be looked for in the vortex atom theory of Sir William Thomson. It is needless to stop to inquire whether it is to this vortex theory also that we have to look for the dropping down on Earth of the first life germ by passing meteor or comet. But Mr. Lodge might be reminded of his wise criticism on his lecture in the same Concepts of Modern Physics, noticing that above quoted declaration by the London professor, the authors ask whether the elements of the vortex theory are familiar or even possible facts of experience, For if they are not, clearly that theory is obnoxious to the same criticism which is said to invalidate the assumptions of actio in distans, and that the able critic shows clearly that ether is not nor can ever be, notwithstanding all scientific claims to the contrary, and thus he opens widely, if unconsciously, the entrance door to our teachings. For as he says, sorry guys, small print, smaller than I have the screen. The medium in which the vortex movement arise is, according to Professor Lodge's own express statement, perfectly homogeneous, incomprehensible, continuous body, incapable of being resolved in simple elements or matter. It is, in fact, continuous, not molecular. And after making this statement, Professor Lodge adds, there is no other body of which we can say this, and hence the properties of the ether must be somewhat different from those of ordinary matter. It appears then that the whole vortex atom theory, which is offered to us as a substitute for the metaphysical theory of actio in distans, rests upon the hypothesis of existence of a material medium which is utterly unknown to experience, and which has properties somewhat different from those of ordinary matter. Hence, the theory, instead of being, as it claimed, a reduction of an unfamiliar fact of experience or a familiar fact, is, on the contrary, a reduction of fact which is perfectly familiar to a fact which is not only unfamiliar, but wholly unknown, unobservable, and unobserved. Furthermore, the alleged vertical motion of, or rather in, the assumed ethereal medium is impossible because motion is a perfectly homogeneous, incompressible, and therefore continuous fluid is not sensible motion. It is manifest, therefore, that whatever the vortex atom theory may lead us, it certainly does not lead us anywhere in the region of physics or in the dominion of vera causae. And I may add that inasmuch as the hypothetical, undifferentiated, and undifferentiable medium is clearly an involuntary re-affliction of the old ontological concept, pure being, the theory under discussion has all the attributes of an inoppressible metaphysical phantom. A phantom, indeed, which we can be made apprehensible only by occultism. From such scientific metaphysics to occultism, there is hardly one step. Those physicists who hold the view that the atomic constitution of matter is consistent with its penetrability need not go far out of their way to be able to account for the greatest phenomena of occultism, now to deride by physical scientists and materialists. Kanchi's material points with that extension are Leibniz, he too, I can't get his name out properly, monads, and Morgan Fischel talks about the monad in his older work. And at the same time, the materials out of which the gods and other invisible powers cloth themselves in bodies. The disintegration and reintegration of material particles with that extension as a chief factor in phenomenal manifestations ought to suggest themselves very easily as clear possibility, at any rate, to those few scientific minds which accept Mr. Kanchi's views. For disposing of that property of matter which they call impenetrability, by simply regarding the atoms as material points exerting as each other's attractions and repulsions, which vary with the distances that separate them. The French theorist explains that from this it follows that if it pleased the author of nature simply to modify the laws according to which the atoms attract or repel each other, we might instantly see the hardest bodies penetrating each other, the smallest particles of matter occupying immense spaces, or the largest masses reducing themselves to the smallest volumes, the entire universe concentrating itself, as it were, in a single point. And that point, indivisible on our plane of perception and matter, is quite visible to the eye of the adept who can follow and see it present on other planes. This next chapter is an interesting one. Is gravitation a law? Now, if we open up our expanding brains, just hear me out. And I don't know, I'm not big in gravitation. And the reason being is a lot of science has been extremely reversed and distorted. And that's to keep us from knowing the ultimate truths of how this reality works. So we have our knowing, but like people are still claiming that people landed on the moon. When you do your research and look at the pictures, you can clearly see it was a set. Now, have we actually been to the moon? I'm sure we have, plenty of millions of times. And if you understand, there are advances in science that us normal humans aren't aware of because they hide it all. Who are they? The people that are ruling this realm. They like everything for themselves. So when it comes to certain laws and theories, and especially gravitation, I see gravitation more as a density. Dense. Things are dense, they fall, right? So this should be very interesting. But again, the time that these people are writing these works are way far back in the day when they just had their own textbooks. And what do we know about textbooks? They're patented and written by people who eschew the world and truth. Is gravitation a law? The corpuscular theory has been unceremoniously put aside, but gravitation, the principle that all bodies attract each other with a force proportional directly to their masses and inversely to the squares of the distances between them, survives to this day and reigns supreme as ever in the alleged ethereal waves of space. As a hypothesis, it had been threatened with death for its inadequacy to embrace all the facts presented to it as a physical law. It is the king of the late and once all impotent imponderables. It is little short of blasphemy, an insult to Newton's grand memory to doubt it. It is the exclamation of America reviewer of Isis Unveiled. Well, what is finally that invisible and intangible God in whom we should believe on blind faith? Astronomers who see in gravitation an easygoing solution for many things and a universal force which allows them to calculate their biplanetary motions care little about the cause of attraction. They call gravity a law, a cause in itself. We call the forces acting under the name effects, and very secondary effects too. One day it will be found that the scientific hypothesis is not answer after all, and then it will follow the corpuscular theory of light and be consigned to rest for many scientific eons in the archives of all exploded speculations. Has not Newton himself expressed grave doubts about the nature of force and the corporeality of the agents as they were then called? So has Clubber another scientific light shining in the night of research. He warns his readers in the Revolution du Globe about the doubtful nature of the so-called forces, saying that it is not so sure whether those agents were not spiritual powers after all. At the onset of his Principia, Sir Isaac Newton took the greatest care to impress upon his school that he did not use the word attraction with regard to the mutual action of bodies in physical sense. To him, it was, he said, a purely mathematical conception involving no consideration of real and primary physical causes. In one of the passages of his Principia, he tells us plainly that physically considered, attractions are rather impulses. In section, he expresses the opinion that there is some subtle spirit by the force and action of which all movements of matter are determined. And in his third letter to Bentley, he says, it is inconceivable that inanimate brute matter should, without the meditation of something else, which is not material, operate upon and affect other matter without mutual contact, as it must do if gravitation, in the sense of Epicurus, be essential and inert in it. That gravity should be innate, inherent, and essential to matter, so that one body may act upon another at a distance through a vacuum, without the meditation of anything else by and through which their action may be conveyed from one to another, is to me so great an absurdity that I believe no man who has in his philosophical matters a competent faculty of thinking can ever fall into it. Congratulations, quantum entanglement. Gravity must be caused by an agent acting constantly according to certain laws, but whether his agent be material or immaterial, I have left to the consideration of my readers. At this, even Newton's contemporaries got frightened at the apparent result and return of occult causes into the domain of physics. Leibniz called his principle of attraction an incorporeal and inexplicable power. The supposition of an attractive faculty and a perfect void was characterized by Bernoulli as revolting. The principle of actio in distans finds thus no more favor than that it does now. Euler, on the other hand, thought the action of gravity was due to either a spirit or some subtle medium. And yet Newton knew of, if he did not accept, the ether of ancients. He regarded the intermediate space between the sidereal bodies as vacuum. Therefore, he believed in the subtle spirit and spirits as we do, guiding the so-called attraction. The above quoted words of the great man have produced poor results. The absurdity has now become a dogma in the case of pure materialism, which repeats, no matter without force, no force without matter, matter and force are inseparable, eternal and indestructible. True, there can be no independent force, since all force is an inherent and necessary property of matter. False. Consequently, there is no immaterial creative power. Oh, poor Sir Isaac. If leaving aside all the other eminent men of science who shared in the same opinion as Euler and Leibniz, the occultists claim as their authorities and supporters only Sir Isaac Newton and Clover, as above cited, they need fear little from modern science and may loudly and proudly proclaim their beliefs. But the hesitation and doubts of the two before cited authorities and of many others, too, whom we could name, did not in the least prevent scientific speculation from wool gathering on the fields of brute matter just as before. First it was matter and an imponderable fluid distance from it. Then came the imponderable fluid so much criticized by Grove, and ether, which was at first discontinuous and then became continuous, after which came the mechanical forces. These have now settled in life as modes of motion, and the ether has become more mysterious and problematic than ever. More than one man of science objects to such crude materialistic views, but then since the days of Plato, who repeatedly asked his readers not to confuse incorporeal elements with their principles, transcendental or spiritual elements, from those of the great alchemists who, like Paracelsus, made a great difference between phenomena and its cause, or the nominum, numinum, and Grove, who, though he sees no reason to divest universally diffused matter of the functions common to all matter, yet he uses the term forces where his critics, who do not attach to the word any idea of specific action, says force. From those days to this, nothing has proved competent to stem the tide of brutal materialism. Gravitation is the sole cause, the acting God, and matter is its prophet, said the men of science only a few years ago. They have changed their views several times since then, but do the men of science understand the innermost thought of Newton, one of the most spiritual-minded and religious men of his day, any better now than they did then? It is certainly to be doubted. Newton is credited with having given the death blow to the elemental vortices of Descartes, the ideas of Anaxagoras resurrected. Though the last modern vortical atoms of Sir W. Thomson do not in truth differ from the former, nevertheless, when his disciple Forbes wrote in the preface to his chief work of his master a sentence declaring that attraction was the cause of the system, Newton was the first to solemnly protest that which in the mind of the great mathematician assumed the shadowy but firmly rooted image of God as a nominum of all, was called more philosophically by the ancient and modern philosophers and occultist gods, or the creative fashioning powers. The modes of expression may have been different, and the ideas more or less philosophically enunciated by all sacred and profane antiquity, but the fundamental thought was the same. For Pythagoras, the forces were spiritual entities, gods, independent of the planets and matter as we see and know them on earth. Who are the rulers of the sidereal heaven? Plato represented the planets as moved by an intrinsic rector, one with his dwelling like a boatman in his boat. As for Aristotle, he called those rulers immaterial substances, though as one who had never been initiated, he rejected the gods as entities. But this did not prevent him from recognizing the fact that the stars and planets were not inanimate masses, but acting and living bodies indeed, as if sidereal spirits were the divine portion of their phenomena. If we look for collaboration in more modern and scientific times, we find Takeo Bari recognizing in the stars of a triple force, divine, spiritual, and vital. Kepler, putting together the Pythagorean sentence, the sun guardian of Jupiter and the verses of David, he placed his throne in the sun, and the Lord is the sun, said that he understood perfectly how the Pythagoreans could believe that all the globes disseminated through space were rational intelligences, faculties, ratio circulating around the sun, in which resides a pure spirit of fire, the source of general harmony. Law of One Ra. When occultists speak of Fohat, the energizing and guiding intelligence in the universe, electric or vital fluid, he is laughed at. Withal, as now shown, neither the nature of electricity nor of life, nor even of light, are to this day understood. The occultist sees in the manifestation of every force in nature the action of the quality or the special characteristic of its nominum, which nominum is a distinct and intelligent individuality on the other side of the manifested mechanical universe. Now, the occultist does not deny, on the contrary, he will support the claim that light, heat, electricity, and so on are affections, not properties or qualities of matter. To put it more clearly, matter is the condition, the necessary basis or vehicle for the manifestation of these forces or agents on this plane. But in order to get the point, the occultists have to examine the credentials of the law of gravity. First of all, the gravitation, the king and ruler of matter, under every form. To do so effectively, the hypothesis in its earliest appearance has been recalled to mind. To being with it is Newton, who was the first to discover it, ? The Athenaeum of January 26, 1867 has some curious information upon this subject. It says the positive evidence can be adduced that Newton derived all his knowledge of gravitation and its laws from Bohm, with whom gravitation or attraction is the first property of nature. For with him, his system shows us the inside of things, while modern physical science is content with looking at the outside. Then again, the science of electricity, which was not yet in existence when he, Bohm, wrote, is there anticipated in his writings, and not only does Bohm describe all the now known phenomena of that force, but he even gives us the origin, generation, birth of the electricity itself. Thus, Newton was profound mind, read easily between the lines, and fathomed the spiritual thought of the great seer in its mystic renderings. Owns his great discovery to Jacob Bohm, the nursling of the genie who watched over and guided him, of whom the author of this article in question so truly remarks that every new scientific discovery goes to prove his profound and intuitive insight into the most secret workings of nature, and have discovered gravity. Newton, in order to render possible the action of attraction in space, had, so to speak, to annihilate every physical obstacle capable of impeding its free action. Ether, among others, though he had more than a presentiment of his existence. Advocating the corpuscular theory, he made an absolute vacuum between the heavenly bodies, where whatever may have been his suspicions and inner convictions about ether, however many friends he may have unbosomed himself to, as in the case of the correspondence with Bentley, his teachings never showed that he had any such belief. If he was persuaded that the power of attraction could not be exerted by matter across a vacuum, how is it that so late in 1860 French astronomers, Le Courtier, for instance, combated the disastrous results of the theory of vacuum established by the great man? Professor Winchell writes, these passages, letter to Bentley, show what were his views respecting the nature of the interplanetary medium of communication. Though declaring that the heavens are void of sensible matter, he elsewhere expected, perhaps, some very thin vapors, streams, and effluvia arising from the atmosphere of the earth, planets and comets, and such an exceedingly rare etherical medium as we have elsewhere described. This only shows that even such great men as Newton have not always the courage of their opinions. Dr. T.H. Hunt called attention to some long neglected passages in Newton's works, from which it appears that a belief in such universal intercosmical medium gradually took root in his mind. but such attention was never called to the said passages before November 28th, 1881, when Dr. Hunt read his celestial chemistry from the time of Newton. Till then, the idea was universal, even among the men of science, that Newton had, while advocating the corpuscular theory, preached the void, as Le Courtier says. The passages have been long neglected, no doubt, because they contradicted and clashed with the preconceived pet theories of the day, till finally the undulatory theory imperviously required the presence of an etherical medium to explain it. This is the whole secret. Anyhow, it is from the theory of Newton's of a universal void, taught, if not believed in by himself, that dates the immense scorn now shown by modern for ancient physics. The old sages had maintained that nature abhorred vacuum, and the greatest mathematicians of the world, bred of the Western races, had discovered the antiquated fallacy and exposed it. And now modern science vindicates, however, ungracefully archaic knowledge, having moreover to vindicate Newton's character and powers of observation at this later hour. After having neglected for 1.5 centuries to pay any attention to such very important passages, perchance because it was wiser not to attract any notice to them, better late than never. And now Father Ether is re-welcomed with open arms and wedded to gravitation, linked to it for weal or woe, until the day when it or both shall be replaced by something else. 300 years ago, it was plenum everywhere that it becomes one dismal vacuity. Later still, the sidereal ocean beds dried up by science rolled onward once more, their ethereal waves receded, ont procedes, must become the motto of exact science, exact chiefly in the findings itself, inexact every leap year. But we will not quarrel with the great men. They had to go back to the earliest gods of Pythagoras and old Cananda for the very backbone and marrow of their correlations and newest discoveries, and this may well afford good hope in the occultists for their minor gods, for we believe in Le Courtier's prophecy about gravitation. We know the day is approaching when an absolute reform will be demanded in the present modes of science by the scientists themselves, as well as was done by Sir W. Grove. Till this day, there is nothing to be done. For if gravitation were dethroned tomorrow, the day after, scientists would discover some other new mode of mechanical motion. Rough and uphill is the path of true science, and its days are full of vexation of spirit. But in the face of its 1,000 contradictory hypotheses to explain physical phenomena, there never was yet a better one than that of motion, however paradoxically interpreted by materialism. As may be found on the first page of Book 1, occultists have nothing surely against motion. The great breadth of Mr. Herbert Spencer is unknown, but believing that everything on earth is a shadow of something in space, they believe in smaller breaths, which, living intelligent and independent of all the but law, blow in every direction during monveratic periods. Sorry guys, these science will reject, but whatever replaces attraction, alas, gravitation, the result will be the same. Science will be as far from the solution of its difficulties as it is now, unless it comes to some compromise with occultism, and even with alchemy. Such supposition will be regarded as impertinence, but remains a fact nevertheless. As Fay says, okay, that's all in French, but he might have added with still more pointed, more French. Sorry guys, like French is the worst thing for me to pronounce. Like I can probably get Latin way easier than I can French. And I don't see the quote on the bottom. Anywho, sorry. Let us remember Sir William Grove's wise concluding remarks on the ultimate stature of matter, or the minute of molecular actions, which he thought man will never know. Much harm has already been done by attempting hypothetically to dissect matter and to discuss the shapes, sizes, and numbers of atoms and their atmospheres of heat, ether, or electricity. Whether the regarding electricity, light, magnetism as simply motions of ordinary matter be, or it be not admissible, certain it is that all past theories have resolved, and all existing theories do resolve, the action of these forces in motion, whether it be on account of our familiarity, never can get that word out either, with motion, we refer other affections to it as to a language which is most easily construed and most capable of explaining them, or whether it be that it is in real the only mode in which our minds, as contradistinguished from our senses, are able to conceive material agencies. Certain it is that since the period of which the mystic notions of spiritual or pre-natural powers were applied to account for physical phenomena, all hypotheses framed to explain them have resolved them into motion. And then the learned gentleman states a purely occult tenet. The term perpetual motion, which I have not infrequently used in these pages, is itself equivocal. If the doctrines here advance be well founded, all motion is, in one sense, perpetual. In masses, whose motion is stopped by mutual concussion, heat or motion of the particles is generated, and thus motion continues, so that if we could venture to extend such thoughts to the universe, we should assume that the same amount of motion affecting the same amount of matter forever. Thus, supposing attraction or gravitation should be given up in favor of the sun being a huge magnet, which is a theory already accepted by some physicists, a magnet that acts on planets as attraction is now supposed to do, where to, or how much further would it lead the astronomers from where they are now? Not an inch further. Kepler came to this curious hypothesis nearly 300 years ago. He had not discovered the theory of attraction and repulsion in cosmos, for it was known from the days of Empedocles that two opposite forces being called by him hate and love, which comes to the same thing. But Kepler gave a pretty fair description of cosmic magnetism. That such magnetism exists in nature as is as certain as the gravitation does not at any rate in which it is taught by science, which never took into consideration the different modes in which the dual force that occultism calls attraction or repulsion may act within our solar system, the Earth's atmosphere, and beyond in the cosmos. This was proven by Newton himself, for there are many phenomena in our solar system which he confessed has his inability to explain by the law of gravitation. Such were the uniformity in the directions of planetary movements, the nearly circular forms of the orbits, and their remarkable conformity to one plane. And if there is one single exception, then the law of gravitation has no right to be referred to as a universal law. These adjustments, we are told, these adjustments were told Newton in his general scholium pronounces to be the work of an intelligent and all-powerful being. Intelligent that being may be, as to all-powerful, there would be every reason to doubt the claim. A poor God, he, who would work upon minor details and leave the most important to secondary forces. The poverty of the argument and the logic in the case is suppressed only by that of Laplace, who, seeking very correctly to substitute motion for Newton's all-powerful being and ignorant of the true nature of the eternal motion, saw it a blind physical law. Might not those arguments be an effect of the laws of motion? He asks, forgetting, as all our modern scientists do, that this law and this motion are a vicious circle, so long as the nature of both remains unexplained. His famous answer to Napoleon would be correctly stated only by one who adhered to the philosophy of the Venetans. It becomes a pure fallacy if we exclude the interface and the inference of operating intelligent, powerful, never all-powerful beings who are called gods. But we would ask the critics of the medieval astronomers, why should Kepler be denounced as most unscientific for offering just the same solution as Newton did, only showing himself more sincere, more consistent, and even more logical? Where many may be the difference between Newton's all-powerful being and Kepler's rectors, his sidereal and cosmic forces or angels. Kepler is again criticized for his curious hypothesis, which made use of vortical movement within the solar system. For his theories in general, for his favoring Empedocles' idea of attraction and repulsion and solar magnetism in particular. Yet several modern men of science, as well known, Hunt, Dr. Richardson, favor the idea very seriously. He is half excused, however, on the plea that to the time of Kepler, no interaction between mass of matter had been distinctly recognized, which was generally different from magnetism. It is distinctly recognized now, ? Does Professor Winchell claim his science any serious knowledge whatever of the natures of either electricity or magnetism, except that both seem to be the effects of some result arising from an undetermined cause? The idea of Kepler, weeded from their theological tendencies, are purely occult. He saw that the sun is a great magnet. That is what some eminent modern scientists and also occultists believe. The solar substance is immaterial. He provided for the constant motion and restoration of the sun's energy and planetary motion, the perpetual care of a spirit or spirits. The whole of antiquity believed in the idea. The occultists do not use the word spirit, but say creative forces, which they endow with intelligence, but we may call them spirits also. This theory is tabooed a great deal more on account of the spirit that is given room in it than anything else. Herschel, the elder, believed in it likewise, and so do several modern scientists also. Nevertheless, Professor Winchell declares that a hypothesis more fanciful and less in accord with the requirements of physical principles has not been offered in ancient or modern times. The same was said once upon a time of the universal ether, and now it is not only accepted perforce, but advocated as the only possible theory to explain away certain mysteries. Grove's ideas, which he first enunciated then in London about 1840, were called the unscientific as the above. Nevertheless, his views on the correlation of forces are now universally accepted. It would very likely require one or more conversant with science than it is the writer to combat with any success some of the now prevailing ideas about gravitation and other similar solutions of cosmic mysteries. But let us recall a few objections that came from recognized men of science, from astronomers and physicists of eminence, who rejected the theory of rotation as well as that of gravitation. Thus, one reads in the French encyclopedia that science agrees in the face of all its representatives that it is impossible to explain physical origin of the rotary motion of a solar system. If the question is asked, what causes rotation, we are answered. It is the centrifugal force, and this force, what it is that produces it. The force of rotation is the grave answer. It will be well, perhaps, to examine both these theories as being directly or indirectly connected. And that, my friends, I'm going to leave right there, because next time we'll go into the theories of rotation in science. So I read a lot about black holes and dark matter and things of the invisible, hypothetical kind of riffraff that goes on in the unseen. Because what we're seeing out, are we seeing out of the firmament? Are we seeing what's in the firmament? Are we making fantastical images on Photoshop and illuminating them and making them all pretty to deceive us? Who knows? Okay, everything is speculative at this point. But when a star collapses, many times it becomes a black hole, which then magnetizes things and attracts things to it and sucks it in. So just something that kept ding, 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 ding in my mind is the fact that I don't necessarily like the gravity word. I prefer other methods of explaining such things. But this, you might not even understand what was being said, but take at most the point that back then, and even now, scientists are always going back and forth, and everything has to be peer reviewed. So what that means is your discovery won't really even be looked at, and other people get to look at your work and discuss it and say, and it never sees the light of day, when brilliant minds are writing really brilliant things. And we could see this with Tesla. Tesla was like silenced. His work was utterly silenced. He's not in children's textbooks. And if he gets a mention, you're lucky, depending on the capacity of consciousness in those books. So we got to take what we have now in understanding that there was battles back then of understanding these simple principles and these laws, and then understanding how askewed, how even back then to put out some bupkis bullshit makes it they want to make it make sense, so they're going to throw anything at it to make it make sense. And then you got rational people who are saying, well, no, there's other things that are going on and you just can't see them, and that's metaphysics. There's a lot going on, but very interesting. There's a lot there, but I totally could see, and I mean, other authors do this. Arthur Schopenhauer in his works goes back and forth with so many different philosophers, you can get lost if you have never read them before. Going back and forth and discussing theories and discussing like, well, I don't like how they're doing that, and I get it. But when it comes to science, and education as a whole, there is indoctrination happening within the research, within the studying of these pupils and these people going to school. You're definitely not getting everything that you're paying for. number one. And you're learning things that might not be true, or they're hiding and suppressing the things that they already know, and they're just teaching you fluff. So I say be careful, because I'm not good with the math, and I love science, I love chemistry, and there's a lot of things within all of this that I see both sides of the coin, and I understand where they're coming from, where Blavatsky is coming from when reading and doing this work. It's because religion and science are really melded, and mathematics are one. You just have to have the understanding that it's all components comprised together to make a beautiful sandwich. Sending each and every one of you protection, light, love, and shielding. Please don't forget to hit that like, subscribe to my channels. I am on YouTube. That's my main channel. I then synchronize it all to Rumble. So I don't even go on Rumble. It just automatically goes there. And then I have BitChute. So just letting you know, I have 3 places, but my main is YouTube. Got to get the knowledge out. And even if you don't agree with what she is saying in her writings, it's a good place for reference, for outside of the box thinking, for reading what people like her were thinking about in those times, because we can't repeat the past. We're not going that way. But if we don't and are unaware, we might be doomed to repeat. So with that, guys, I hope to see you on the next one. Hopefully that's tomorrow. I'm working my butt off making artwork, and it's a whirlwind right now, but it's a good one, and I'm super excited and happy. Just give me patience with a lot of things right now, because there's a lot. This usually happens. I get hit with a lot of stuff at once, and just give me some time. I'll get to everybody. And I just did an oracle reading a few hours ago. If you're interested in knowing what the universe wants for us as a collective to moving forward, it's focus. But go check it out. Some good stuff and good juicy things in there to help you. Okay, guys, until the next one, have a great day. Be safe, be seen, and have a great rest of your week.